I understand, Stefan, but the issue with God, the really problem with God is a person must, on his own thinking of his front cortex, need to understand it by himself. You can't tell me there is a God. It doesn't help. If I don't click with my own brain, on my own volition, and you can help me, you can guide me, you can practice me, whatever. But if I don't derive and fall in understanding what is unconditional truth by myself, I don't know it. It's something innate in every person. You can come to understanding what is unconditional truth, but if you don't cross that bit, everything else will be a disaster, because we will never... you know what I mean? That bit is really critical for understanding the whole Bible from beginning to end.
So you're saying if I don't believe it but expect proof, I'm going to be disappointed. But if I do believe it, it'll all kind of make sense.
No, believe it. I don't understand believe it. Dan and I, in that regard, when we say believe is what I do. What I do is my belief, not what I believe is what I do. Because the subject of my belief is what I did in the end, not what led me to it. So, but to know God, it's a cognitive process. You have to go. You have to understand what is unconditional truth mean, or reality of truth mean. If the minute,
but you can't prove it. You can't. You can assert it, and you can cross your fingers and hope that I accept it, but you can't prove it. And therefore, what you're saying is not philosophical, but it's dangerous because you use words like truth and universality and values and ethics and so on. These are philosophical terms, and you're kind of hijacking them for an agenda based upon rank superstition.
Thank you.
You know, it bothers me. If you just want to say, I believe because I believe. I have no reason, no evidence. I can't prove that it's true, but it's my particular preference to believe this. Okay, well then that to me is, at least that's a more honest statement. But you keep trying to use all these philosophical terms to cover up this rank assertion of superstition. There's no proof in anything that you're saying.
Stefan, that's exactly, if we cross, that's exactly the point me and Dan arguing. You sincerely put it together. And what I'm saying is, God is not a truth like there is a fact. The table, I sit on a chair now, it is a fact, there's a chair, and I sit on it now. That's not the kind of factual truth. I can prove it because it's a value. I can't prove a value in a sense, or because it doesn't have a physical way of me prove it. Or I conceptualize it, or my brain can comprehend it, or not. It's a value.
Are you saying, wait, are you saying that values cannot be proven?
It's a private domain. It's cannot be proven. It's inside. I need to realize myself. I can't go and see it externally to me, Stefan. It's not something I can. That's why prove it to you there is a God. It's an impossible task in that sense.
You keep saying in that sense or in this way, but there are things which we can establish for which we have no particular empirical evidence, right? So the old syllogism, which I used in the last show, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal.
Yes.
We don't need to go outside the room we're standing in to know the truth of that. Or something like the scientific method. The scientific method does not exist in tangible reality. It doesn't exist like a tree or a rock or a forehead. But nonetheless, it is a universal, empirical, and rational methodology for determining truth about the universe. So the fact that something doesn't exist in material form doesn't mean that it can't be validated rationally. There's tons, of course, of mathematical theorems that may never be implemented in the world, in engineering or in any other methodology that's empirical, but they still can be examined for their truth value based upon the rational methodology of mathematics. But so this is what I mean when you say that you keep... Yeah, go ahead.
I absolutely agree with you, but a transcending, or what we call the first sentence of creation, which means it's not in the universe and it's not the universe, it's a transcending, it's outside of, it's outside of physics. Therefore, the discipline you apply to it is not relevant to it, because it's a value.
how
How
do
can
you-
you prove value? Any other value you can't put a mathematic. The way you can express gravity in mathematics, you cannot express God in that way. The same way you cannot express any other value this way. It's
Yes,
not just
but
God, it's any
my
other
friend,
value.
when you say outside of physics, you're saying the opposite of matter and rationality.
No,
But the opposite of matter and rationality. hang on. The
Okay.
opposite of matter and rationality is called non-existence and falsehood. The opposite of rationality is false. And the opposite of matter is non-existence, which is how we know to walk through a door frame rather than into the wall, because we look for where there's no door or a hole in the wall, and we go through that. That means the door is not there, right? So the opposite of material presence is non-existence, which is why we can go through the doorway rather than bump into a door when the door is open. So when you say, well, you see, but God is outside of physics, what you're saying is, well, we have a standard for existence called material presence and or, at least rational consistency. God is the opposite of that. But then what you're saying is God's existence translates in real terms to the opposite of existence. And so what you're saying, when you say God exists, but God is defined as the opposite of existence, you're saying the opposite of existence exists, which fails at every conceivable level philosophically.
Okay, I hear that. The point is that if we're living in a conditional reality,
what does that mean?
That means the universe. I mean, we can trace it down to about 15 billion years or something, and the planet one day will be. I don't know. I read it's about in 3,000 years from now will blow up or something. So it will not be existing, the planet.
Wait, 3,000? I think it's a little. I think the sun's got 10 billion years to go or something like that. I can't remember, but it's more than 3,000.
I think it's about, I read some sort of a theory about we have about 3,000 years to leave the planet, because before it will blow up. So nothing is fixed. It's a conditional. I born and I die, and I have a beginning and end, and every other matter have a cycle and beginning and end. God is not subject to that. He is outside of that, and I can't apply a discipline you apply for the world to God, because it's a value. You can't ever apply that discipline to value. And
but you see, no, hang on. Look, you've just done exactly the same thing again, which is you say matter has a beginning and an end. Now, as far as I know, matter can neither be created or destroyed, but only transferred to energy and back again. But that doesn't. Let's pretend that that's true. Let's pretend what you're saying is true, that matter has a beginning and an end, and God does not. But you've just done exactly the same thing. Matter is that which exists. And matter, according to your definition, has a beginning and has an end. Now, if matter, which is the test of whether something exists or not, has a beginning and an end, and you say that God has neither a beginning nor an end, then you're simply saying God does not exist, because matter is that which exists, and if God has the opposite characteristics of that which exists, God does not exist. You can keep stripping away all these standards of existence and say somehow that proves the existence of God, but it doesn't. If you keep taking away standards, well, he's outside of physics, he's outside of time, he is neither created nor destroyed, he's eternal, he's omniscient, he's omnipotent, he's omnipresent. Like all you're doing is stripping away standards for how we know whether something exists. And then somehow when you feel like when you've stripped all these standards away from something that exists, then you somehow have established its existence, but you haven't. All you've done is define something as the opposite of that which exists and then claim that somehow that makes that exist.
Okay. I don't apply the same discipline as you apply, because for me, I look at what I call unconditional truth or reality of truth or truth. And for me, as a value, not as what you call, I declare it as my value, yes? It's not... I find my
listen, you don't get to do that. That's not philosophy. You don't listen. If I hand you a lump of coal and I say that's gold, Have I turned it into gold? I have not. I've simply used a word that is inappropriate to what I'm handing you. And so you can say, well, I don't use the same methodology as you. I am focused on unconditional truth and this and that and the other. No, no, no. You don't get to use these words like truth and existence and reality to just layer over whatever your particular religious prejudices happen to be. That's not how philosophy works. I don't get to do it either, by the way. I mean, I think it's true that everyone should believe that Freddie Mercury is the best singer who ever lived, but I can't make it so just by saying it so, right? So when I give you rational arguments and then you say, well, but I use a different methodology, well, you're not using a methodology. What you're doing is you're pillaging from the gold pile of philosophy and covering up something that you have no philosophical proof for and claiming you've done something, which is exactly the same as me grabbing a stone from the ground and calling myself a gold miner because I write the word gold on it. I mean, you're just writing the word truth on stuff, right?
I agree with you. We don't use I agree and I don't agree with you. I agree with you on what you're saying. Now, what I don't agree with you is that I don't think this is where the exact point is. When I use the word God and when you use the word God and the discipline you apply to make it existing and I apply to make it existing is very, very different. I don't agree with your definition to say if God exists or not with your way, the way you're going about it, and what's your understanding of it. I have a completely different understanding, and I go about it in a completely different way. I'm not so.
Yeah, and your way your way is the opposite of philosophy, which means you can't use philosophical terms like existence. Existence is a philosophical term in terms of metaphysics. The scientific method to determine existence or non-existence falls into the realm of epistemology, or how we know things are true or false. So you are using all of these philosophical terms while steadfastly opposing any philosophical methodology. You don't get to do that. Neither do I. I cannot assert, listen, if I just say, I don't know, Chinese guys are all shoplifters, and then people say, well, where's your proof of that? And you say, well, or I say, well, it's my method. I have a different methodology. It's proven because it's an unconditional truth. And people would say, well, no, if you're going to make a statement like all Chinese people are shoplifters, you either have to prove it or you have to back down from it, because you're making a statement about reality, and a prejudicial statement about reality. And so I don't get to say, well, my prejudices are exactly as true as your 2 and 2 make 4. I just use a different methodology. It's like, no, there is only one methodology for determining truth, and that methodology is reason plus evidence. That's it. There's no backup. There's no side pocket. There's no, plan B called, well, I'm just going to make cloudy assertions and pretend that they're philosophy. If you want to say that something is true, then you have to do what scientists do if they claim that their theory is true, is they've got to have a rationally consistent theory and they have to subject it to empirical testing. They don't get to say, well, my theory that the world is banana-shaped is true, I just use a different methodology. It's like, well, if you're using a different methodology, it's not true. Right? It's like saying, well, in my mathematics, 2 and 2 make 5. It's just a different methodology from your mathematics. It's like, no, we don't get that choice. If you're going to do mathematics, if you're going to do science, you have to do mathematics and you have to do science. You can't make a statement in opposition to the scientific method and say you're just using a different version of the scientific method, and then take all of the language that the scientific method has made powerful, like valid and established and so on, then that I don't get to pillage all the value that science has created and say, well, I'm doing the opposite of science, but just call it slightly different from science. So I got to move on to the next caller, and I'm sorry to have cut you off. I really, really enjoyed the conversation. You're certainly welcome to call back anytime. I'm glad that we had a chance to chat at this level. But that would be my response. I'm certainly happy to give you the last word, of course.
First, I enjoyed to talk to you, and thank you for giving the time. I do still thinking is that I don't understand how you apply a scientific method to a value. I don't think it's compatible, and I don't think it's a fair way, or it's a misunderstanding of the word God to apply a scientific discipline of proving is existing with that kind of discipline. So if we apply that kind of discipline, of course it doesn't exist in that way. But if we apply a discipline the way I suggest about that, it's a value and therefore is not subject to a scientific discipline. It is exist.
All right. I already talked about my opinions about those, but thank you very much for your call. And Mike, who do we have up next?